Hey, why don't you come to Mom's funeral, sis? What? I never thought you were such a terrible person. I was caught off guard as my younger brother's words pierced through the phone line. His tearful voice held no hint of deceit. James, Mom passed away 5 years ago, you know. My name is Jessica, I reminded him gently. I'm a 30-year-old office worker dating a man named Robert. We're starting to get serious, and he's eager to meet my parents. But there's a weight of guilt pressing on me. Both my parents have passed away, having divorced years ago amidst irreconcilable differences. I was just 16 then. After the divorce, I lived with my father, who cared for me deeply. He supported my piano lessons and studies, and I took on household chores in return, cooking dinner, making rice balls, anything to see his smile of approval. Then came college, where I excelled, much to my father's pride. He encouraged me to visit my mother, who lived with my younger brother James. Big sister Jessica, long time no see. We shared brief moments of joy during those visits. But after my mother remarried, things changed. My husband-to-be wanted me to focus on our life together, which strained my relationship with my previous family. Though I wished them happiness, conflicting emotions swirled within me as I navigated this new chapter of my life. But I don't want to lose the opportunity to see my brother. Can't we just reduce the frequency of our meetings? I'm sorry, but James is entering adolescence and I don't want to confuse him too much. I see, but once we get used to our new life, I'm sure my husband will let us meet. Yeah, I understand. I wasn't entirely convinced, but I didn't want to protest and risk damaging my mother and brother's relationship with their new family. So, I decided to endure it. Years passed. I finished college and landed a job. Yet during that time, I couldn't see my brother or mother. 4 years had gone by, and I couldn't help but wonder why they couldn't spare even a moment to meet me. Perhaps they were leading such fulfilling lives that they no longer needed me. My brother, who was just 11 when we last met, was now 15. I wanted to offer him some encouragement as he prepared for private high school entrance exams. With that thought in mind, I mustered the courage to call my mother. To my surprise, an unfamiliar man answered the phone. Hello, who is this? Isn't this my mother's number? Are you Jessica by any chance? Yes, I am. I'm David, the man who remarried your mother. She's busy right now, so I answered the phone. Oh, I see. Well, it's been 4 years since I last saw them, and I was thinking I'd like to see my brother and mother soon. Really? You haven't seen them? No, I haven't seen them at all. I see. Maybe your mother doesn't want to see you. What? Actually, when I mentioned your name just now, my wife didn't react at all. Is James not around? I at least want my brother to respond to my call. I was thinking that, but James is right next to me. He's just playing a game and not reacting at all. It seems like they've both forgotten about you and adapted to their current lives. They're both living happily, so could you please leave them alone? I'm gonna hang up now, David stated before ending the call. I was left so stunned that I couldn't move for a while after the conversation ended. The thought that my brother and mother might have forgotten about me and were living their lives without me was too much to bear. Seeking solace, I turned to my father for advice. That's strange. Those two love you, Jessica, he reassured me. He tried to reach out to my mother, but her response was firm. Please don't call again. In the end, we couldn't meet or even speak to my mother and brother. Life carried on, and I became increasingly occupied with work. Still, they lingered in the back of my mind. Then, about 3 years after that distressing phone call, I received devastating news. What? Mom. It was a notification informing me that my mother had died in a traffic accident. Rushing to the hospital, I was led to the room where her lifeless body lay. Her peaceful expression made it seem as if she were merely sleeping with her eyes closed. I never imagined I'd see her again like this. Sis, a voice broke through my mourning. James. As I grieved my mother's passing, my brother entered the room. It had been 7 long years since I last saw him, and he had grown into a completely different person. Why didn't you come to see us? He questioned, his tone filled with hurt. Did you start hating me and Mom? Wait a minute, I interjected. It was your stepfather, David, who told me not to see you. Dad would never say something like that, James rebutted firmly. Dad's an amazing person, and I look up to him. He wouldn't say something like not meeting with you, sis. What? My brother's trust in our stepfather, David, was evident. They must have developed a strong bond over the past 7 years. Then, a man who seemed to be David arrived. "Hi, it's our first time meeting in person, isn't it?" he greeted. "Hello." David appeared to be in his early 50s with a determined air about him, as if he could accomplish anything. Despite encountering various company employees in my line of work, he struck me as somewhat cunning. "I'm really shocked that my wife passed away so suddenly. The funeral will be held soon, so I'd like both you and your father to attend, Jessica," David informed me. Understood. Though my mind was preoccupied, attending my mother's funeral took precedence. My father and I went together to bid her farewell. The funeral proceeded without incident, but a dispute over the inheritance soon arose. "Jessica hasn't seen my wife in 7 years, so could you please give up the inheritance?" David proposed. "What? Wait a minute," I interjected. "Wasn't it David who didn't let me see her?" "Sis, are you still saying that? How many times do I have to explain that Dad would never do that?" James countered. No matter how desperately I pleaded, my brother wouldn't believe me. "Oh dear, it seems I've become the villain here," David remarked. "Dad's not wrong. Sis is just saying weird things," James asserted. "Sis, I don't really understand inheritance, but will you give it up?" he pressed. "What? I should at least receive the minimum inheritance, right? What would Mom think if she saw you being so greedy about money?" I retorted, feeling as though David treated me as if I were money-grubbing. At this point, my father intervened. "Wait a minute, my daughter is only claiming her rightful share. Stop making such accusations." Thanks to my father's words, David fell silent. "No matter what you say, I'll make sure my daughter gets at least the minimum inheritance." "What's this? Are you and Sis conspiring to make things difficult for us?" David challenged. "That's not the case. This is just a claim of rights," my father clarified. The discussion grew heated, and in the end, I received only the minimum inheritance, but it created a divide between my brother and me. My antagonistic relationship with David, my brother's trusted stepfather, caused this rupture. Finally reconnecting with my brother after so long, only to be met with his disdain, compounded the sadness of losing my mother. As if that weren't enough, more misfortune followed. My father was diagnosed with cancer, given only 1 more year to live. It felt like an onslaught of crushing blows, leaving me asking, "Why is this happening to me?" I spiraled into negativity. But my father, noticing my change, gently spoke to me. "Jessica, everyone dies someday. It's not something we can control. I've been happy living with you all this time, and I intend to enjoy the time I have left to the fullest." Dad? In the time that remained, we went on trips and did everything he wanted to do. When he passed away, I was left with an unbearable pain from losing both of my beloved parents. Yet my father's last words echoed in my mind: "Look forward and enjoy every moment of life." With his words as my guide, I wiped away my tears and chose to move forward. At my father's funeral, my brother arrived, accompanied by David. This presence fueled my brother's aggression towards me, his focus solely on my father's inheritance. "Sis, you forcibly took part of Mom's inheritance, so I'm definitely taking Dad's inheritance," he asserted. I didn't want to engage in further conflict or hostility, so I quietly agreed. "Yes, of course, I was planning to give it to you anyway," I responded calmly, making arrangements for the inheritance to be transferred to my brother. Since then, I haven't seen or heard from my brother. It felt awkward reaching out to him, and years passed by. Eventually, I met Robert through a friend's introduction. As our relationship progressed towards marriage, I decided to disclose everything to him about the loss of both my parents and the strained relationship with my only sibling, my brother. Despite knowing all this, Robert still wanted to marry me, and I found myself falling in love with him. As our courtship continued smoothly and we received a marriage proposal, I felt like I was on top of the world. But then, in a sudden twist, I received a call from my brother. "Hello, James," I greeted, surprised and elated to hear from him after so long. "What's up?" "Oh, speaking of which, I have something to tell you too." However, before I could say anything, my brother interrupted me with an accusation that left me bewildered. "Sis, why didn't you come to Mom's funeral? I never thought you were such a terrible person," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "What? I don't think my sister was such a terrible person," I responded, utterly confused by his sudden accusation over the phone. "What's going on? Why are you saying something so nonsensical all of a sudden?" "Nonsensical? Mom's dead, you know," he retorted, his voice filled with anguish. "Wait, James, calm down. I urged, struggling to make sense of the situation. How can I calm down? Was this some kind of cruel joke? He questioned, his voice breaking. No, it was too harsh for that, I realized, feeling the weight of the truth in my brother's sobbing voice. I took a deep breath, steadying myself before addressing my brother James. James, Mom died 5 years ago. I began slowly, expecting him to understand. But his response shocked me to the core. What are you talking about? Mom didn't die back then. What? What are you saying? You saw Mom's body too, didn't you? We even had the funeral, I countered, confusion clouding my thoughts. His insistence only added to my bewilderment. No, Mom was alive. I lived with her for about 3 years after that. What? What do you mean? James's voice trembled with disbelief. So, I was living with Mom, I tried to explain, struggling to grasp the situation myself. It's best to go along with the story at times like this, I reasoned, trying to make sense of the apparent disconnect. Yes, but they said she would die soon without an offering. I gave all the money I earned as an offering, James confessed, his voice heavy with regret. Suddenly, it dawned on me that my brother had been deceived. What? At that moment, I realized that my brother had been deceived, but the offering wasn't enough, and Mom died. James, can you introduce me to the person you've been making offerings to? I asked urgently, wanting to understand the full extent of the deception. Of course, you should be saved too, sis, he responded earnestly, leading me to the person who had supposedly rescued Mom. Later, as we entered the office building where counseling was conducted, I felt a sense of unease. Teacher, my brother called out as we stepped into the private office. And there, to my astonishment, was David. Wait a minute, you're the one who remarried my mother and became James's stepfather, right? Why is James calling you teacher? I demanded, my confusion growing. James and I have a patient-teacher relationship, David explained calmly, though his presence only fueled my suspicion. What? No, you live with James, right? James even called you Dad, I protested, struggling to comprehend the situation. Sis, what are you talking about? David is a counselor. Dad died 3 years ago, remember? James interjected, his voice tinged with concern. Wait, David, are you brainwashing James? I accused, unable to shake off the feeling of dread creeping over me. What are you talking about? I've just been listening to him. Before that, I was counseling his mother, David clarified, though his explanation did little to alleviate my growing unease. What? You deceived my mother too? I accused, feeling a surge of anger and betrayal. Sis, don't say such terrible things like deceived, James pleaded, his expression torn between confusion and distress. Jessica seems quite confused. Well, it's understandable. Losing both parents can often lead to mental illness. David interjected, his tone patronizing. What are you talking about? You've unconsciously put a stopper in your mind to avoid facing reality. You're suppressing the grief of losing your parents, he concluded, his words sending a chill down my spine. I can help you release it. Stop it. I'm already looking forward and living my life. Really? Aren't you just enduring it? I'm not enduring anything. It's better not to force yourself. If you do as I say, your heart will feel much lighter. Really? Really? James became cheerful that way too, so why not entrust yourself to me? Yes, please. Good girl. Now, sit here and think about your mom and dad. When I place my hands on your head, the sad feelings will magically disappear. How about it? Do you feel lighter? No, I don't feel any lighter. I see. Maybe it's because the offering is 0, so there is not enough power. What? If you really want to get better, you have to make a lot of offerings. Is that so? Yeah, so let's start with an offering of $1,000. $1,000? That's still not enough to be completely healed. You need to make more and more offerings. Is that so? James made offerings too, right? Yes, he's been making offerings ever since he graduated from high school and started working. That's how he was able to find his mother and regain happy days. But the offerings stopped at one point, and his mother really died this time. So, he's reflecting on that and increasing his offerings to be saved. I see. I called out towards the entrance. That's how it is, Robert. As I said that, the door to the room opened, and my fiancé, Robert, walked in. Who exactly are you? David asked, with a suspicious look at Robert, who then handed David his business card. I'm a lawyer. I've been listening to your conversation, and it seems you've been brainwashing James and swindling a large sum of money from him. A lawyer? He's also my fiancé, and we're going to sue you and recover the money. As I said that, David momentarily looked flustered but then snorted and retorted, I thought you'd say something like that. James was saved by me. There's no fact that I deceived him. I was just providing legitimate counseling, right, James? David asked my brother with a triumphant look on his face. My brother glanced at us and then said, I was deceived by you and forced to contribute a large sum of money. You, James. David's eyes widened at my brother's statement. It seems your brother intends to sue you. Wait, this must be some mistake, right, James? I saved you. Are you going to betray me like this? Teacher, I do think that thanks to you, both my mother and I felt relieved many times. But it's also true that you were gradually brainwashing us, right? In fact, I became unable to make sound judgments because of you. You brought a woman who looked like my mother and made me believe that she was actually alive. And then, you instilled fear that she would die if I didn't make offerings. Moreover, you disposed of all the photos of my mother and me without my noticing and replaced them with composite photos of a fake mother. The pictures were so sophisticated and natural that I naturally believed the fake mother was my real mother. And before I knew it, almost all of my salary from the years since I graduated from high school and started working was taken by you. When I met my sister and saw the real photos of my mother, the brainwashing suddenly broke. That's when I decided to sue you, capturing evidence if you actually demanding an exorbitant amount of money. You betrayed me. David exclaimed, stunned by my brother's revelation. Don't mess with me. You're the one who kept swindling money from me and my mother. You brainwashed us, telling us not to meet my sister and even made us lie that you were our stepfather. My mother died without seeing my sister for years. I'll not only get back the money you took from me but also the money you took from my mother. You've sucked money from us and enjoyed yourself. Now suffer misfortune. My brother angrily confronted David with such intensity that David stumbled back in surprise. Then we'll see you in court, Robert said, and we left the scene. After that, James sued David under Robert's legal representation. David was ordered to pay back the total amount of $300,000 that he had swindled from my brother and mother. Not only was David ordered to pay compensation, but his outrageous fraudulence became known to his previous patients and their families, and he seems to be in serious trouble due to lawsuits and compensation claims from many people. He had been doing as he pleased for so long that he deserved to be punished. I realized that our relationship had been strained because of the brainwashing, and with everything resolved, the resentment between my brother and me disappeared. My brother also attended my wedding with Robert. I hadn't seen my brother for many years because of David, but now I want to fill that gap by regularly meeting and getting along well with my only sibling.